Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. Now today I'm going to tell you my thoughts on the brand new 2020 remix of George Harrison's 1970 album All Things Must Pass. This is the 50th anniversary edition. If you saw my unboxing video, this is a follow-up to that. Now I had a chance to sit down and do an A-B comparison. Now how I did this was I did needle drops of both albums, and then I put them into my editing program, which is Final Cut. And then what I did is essentially made a multi-cam clip. So I'm able to quickly switch between the two mixes, and they're relatively synced up. Now, the last side is really out of sync. The brand new mix of Apple Jams, the last two songs, run a few seconds longer, like noticeably longer. It's interesting. You can see the waveforms right there. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's my pressing. Maybe my turntable took a crap on those and slowed down. I'm not really sure why. There's so many variables, but if you notice the same thing, please let me know. Okay, so after doing all that, oh, and by the way, I was listening on headphones to really get a sense of the stereo mix, presence, that sort of a thing. I would say overall, I enjoy, or rather I prefer the new mix of these songs. There are a few instances where I prefer the original mix, but by and large, the Phil Spector mix just feels very dated, and it overall just feels, I don't want to use the word compressed, but that's kind of what I mean. It's compressed in the sense that it's narrow. It's narrow dynamically. Dynamically is the wrong word too. The best way I can think of it is spectrum. I feel when you're listening to the original mix and then listening to the new mix, the original mix feels very narrow spectrum-wise, like it's going through a very small tunnel, versus the 2020 mix feels much more open. The highs are higher, the lows are lower. The middle really sparkles and shines, especially when it comes to Harrison's vocals. I think that's really important, and that was something that often got lost with the original mix. It just felt like they dumped a bunch of reverb over the whole thing and called it a day. All right, with all that said, let's break this down into more detail, going track by track, starting with obviously the first track, I'd Have You Anytime. And right off the bat, I think you'll hear what I mean about Harrison's vocals are brought higher onto the mix. I think in the original mix, it just felt like they were sitting, and it felt like he was competing with the other mid-range instruments, especially the snare drum. Here, it feels fuller, more luscious, even in some respects sounds warmer. Also, I think part of that warmer sound, that more grounded, present sound has to do with the, I don't want to say boosted bass, but the bassier bass and just more rounded drum sound. Those are definitely add to the bottom of this, giving it that broader spectrum of sound. It feels like it's higher fidelity. I don't know if that's technically true what's going on here, but it does sparkle a bit more. Same goes with the highs. I feel like there is a lot more that your ears can dance around, as opposed to the original mix was, a lot of these elements were fighting against each other because they all seem to sort of get, EQ'd into one sort of range of frequencies. All right, moving right along, we have My Sweet Lord. Now, this is an interesting case because I am very familiar with this song. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. And this is one instance where I kind of prefer the original mix over the new mix. The new mix, while it's got better bass and drums, and overall I think it's better balanced, I think it loses a little bit of the sharpness that's in the original mix, meaning that it feels a little duller to me. It doesn't feel as alive as in the original mix. Moving on to Wah Wah, right off the bat, the guitar on what sounds like the right channel sounds a lot clearer, even though it's distorted guitar. Again, the bass and drums sound way better on the new mix, and what this translates to is giving this song a lot more oomph. Now, moving on to Isn't It a Pity, I really like the vocal presence here with George. He feels much closer, at least up on the mic. The drenched in reverb sound on the original mix is gone, and it just feels more intimate, and I really like the sound of this.
Isn't it a pity? Isn't it a pity?
When the drums kick in, it feels very unbalanced in the original mix. His vocals get lost, and the snare drum sounds way too hot. It just sort of overpowers the whole song.
Some things take so long. Some things take so long.
All right, up next we got What Is Life? And again, this song really benefits from the boosted bass and drums. It just really rounds out this song for me. In the original mix, again, the snares are way too bright for my taste. Later in the song, when the guitar overdubs and strings come in, they really, again, benefit from the new mix. It just sounds overall fuller, more lush, warmer. The original mix, it just feels, again, compressed, just flat and hollow, not as well-rounded. The best way I can describe it is AM versus FM radio. The new mix sounds like FM, whereas the original just sounds like AM. All right, up next we have If Not For You, a Bob Dylan song. And this is an interesting case because for the very beginning, the intro, I think I prefer the more reverb heavy section of the original mix. But once the vocals come in, overall I much prefer the new mix.
If not for you, if not for you.
Listening to the 2020 remix makes me realize how much of a misstep it was for this original mix to be just completely drenched in reverb throughout the whole song. It's a subtle thing, but it sounds so much cleaner on this new mix.
The winter would hold no spring. The winter would hold no spring.
Up next we have Behind That Locked Door, and when George's vocals hit in the new mix, it just gave me chills. It felt like he was right there in the room with me. I love that sound so much.
Why are you still crying? Why are you still crying?
Almost all of the reverb that was present in the original mix is gone on this new version, and I think it really benefits. I like this song way more than I did hearing it in its original form.
If I'm rich or I'm poor. If I'm rich or I'm poor.
So now we're coming to Let It Down, and for the very beginning it's a bit of a mixed bag because I kind of like how metallic and sort of crass the original mix is. But as the song progresses, I definitely prefer the new mix.
Though you sit in another chair. Though you sit in another chair.
And lastly, the horn section, again, sounds so much better in the new mix. In the original, I felt like the drums really overpowered that moment. Up next, we have Run of the Mill, and right off the bat, the guitar intro sounds much better in this new mix. I do prefer the reverb effect on his vocals in the original mix, but overall, the new mix is just way better balanced, and it just makes for a better listening experience, in my opinion.
Everyone has choice. Everyone has choice.
Moving right along, we have Beware of Darkness, and again, his vocals are done so much more justice on the new mix.
The pain that often mingles. The pain that often mingles.
And again, the guitar solo here is way better balanced in this new mix. It's not fighting with the other instruments. Moving on to Apple Scruffs, this might be a rare case where I kind of prefer the original mix. It just sounds a little sharper, a little bit, it's got more of an edge.
Seen the passers-by all stir like he had no place to go. Seen the passers-by all stir like he had no place to go.
Up next, we have the Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp, parentheses, Let It Roll, and yeah, what can I say? It's hard to go back to the original mix after hearing this new one. It's so well balanced and put together that listening to the old one now sounds like a rough demo. The wall of sound approach did not do this song justice.
Let it roll across the floor. Let it roll across the floor.
Also, the bassy chanting section, I'm not sure what to call it, sounds much better in this new mix. The old mix, it just felt very muddy and it was hard to discern. Like you weren't sure if that was an instrument or vocals or maybe my system's on the fritz. So yeah, now we've come to A Waiting on You All, and on the original mix, once the verse hits, there's way too much reverb to really understand what's going on. The new mix clears all this up, and it's just delightful to listen to. It's very, very pleasant.
You don't need to love it. You don't need to love it.
And the little rundown section sounds so much better in this new mix. So now we have All Things Must Pass, the title track, and I love the fact that they brought the horns more into the center channel versus how they are on the original mix. Also on the original mix, I feel like the echo or delay that they put on his vocals sounds a bit clipped, and it doesn't sound good to my ears, and it sounds a lot better to me in the new mix. Moving on to I Dig Love, I noticed there's a lot more tape hiss in the original mix. Also, the drums here, there's some sort of an effect or something going on to where it really feels out of phase. Like it just sounds wrong to my ears, whereas on the new mix, there's that effect as well on the drums, but it feels much more refined and purpose-driven, like it sounds less clumsy. Moving on to Art of Dying, the intro section here seems to be really driven by the snare drum, whereas on the new mix, the bass really drives this section, and I think that's for the benefit of this song. Overall, the original mix sounds very shrill and tinny, versus the new mix feels so much warmer. I love listening to it. Lastly, the guitar and drum rundown into the horn section is way more satisfying to listen to in the new mix. Up next we have Isn't It a Pity version 2, and in the original mix there's way more tape hiss present versus the new mix. However, I kind of like the vocal treatment of the original mix, but like I said, the tape hiss kind of kills it for me.
Isn't it a pity? Isn't it a pity?
Now this is interesting because the new mix overall doesn't blow me away like some of the other tracks, and I kind of feel like there might be a little too much bass going on in the new mix versus the original. And so this is one instance where I don't really have a preferred version. There's elements I like of both as well as elements I don't like. It's kind of a toss-up. Moving on to Hear Me Lord, and already with the drum intro I prefer the new mix. It just sounds more aggressive. In the original mix, when the guitar comes in, it gets rather lost in the mix, whereas in the new one, it comes across as much more powerful. Now we're moving on to Out of the Blue, and I think I prefer the original mix. It just sounds harsher and tinnier, and I think that really works for this song. And again, for It's Johnny's Birthday, I think I prefer the original mix. It just sounds harsher and shriller, which really adds to this demented feeling of this song. It almost sounds a little too clean on the new mix.
It's Johnny's birthday. It's Johnny's birthday.
Moving on to Plug Me In, and the new mix definitely takes the cake here. That added bass really makes this track sing, and I really enjoy it a lot more now. Up next we have I Remember Jeep, and this track also benefits from the new mix. The bass is boosted and thus giving this song some more oomph. It's less muddy, it's more clear, and it just grooves a lot better. And lastly, we have Thanks for the Pepperoni, and again, this really benefits from the new mix. It actually makes it listenable for me. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this new mix. This will be my go-to version of the album to listen to. And I was surprised that I did prefer the original mix for a couple of songs. I didn't think that was gonna happen, and that being said, I don't think the original mix is bad by any means. It's just when you're presented with something new and with modern sensibilities applied to it in terms of how the stereo mix is compiled, in terms of panning and all that, sometimes that sort of thing reveals flaws in an original thing that you weren't aware of before. So I will still hang on to my original mix. But by and large, I think this will be my go-to, especially for people who hadn't heard it before. I think this is a bit more approachable in some regards. I think it's a more enjoyable listening. It's a polish. It's sort of, it brings out a lot more nuance that was in the original mix, but it got kind of muddy and lost with the wall of sound approach to that mix. And so I think it does the original mix justice. It doesn't overstep. It doesn't try to make it sound like something completely different. And I think they did a fantastic job with all that. But I want to know what you have to say. What did you think of this new mix? Do you prefer it wholeheartedly over the original? Or are you like me and there's a few songs that you prefer? Like you would make a mixtape of a little bit of this, a little bit of that to create your perfect All Things Must Pass. I want to know. All right, everybody, that will do it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I am your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.